The desert sun hammered down on forward operating base Rhino like a physical weight, turning the tarmac into a shimmering mirror of heat. Staff Sergeant Maya Reeves stood beside her, Thunderbolt II, running her pre-flight check with the kind of methodical precision that came from 7 years of close air support missions. The aircraft looked exactly like what it was, a flying tank built around a 30-millimeter rotary cannon, ugly and brutal and beloved by every ground soldier who'd ever called for help. Maya's hands moved across the titanium bathtub that protected the cockpit, checking panels, feeling for stress fractures. She didn't notice the 3 Marine officers watching from the operations building, didn't see the way Captain Hendricks gestured dismissively in her direction. She was too focused on the pre-flight, on the mission brief that had landed on her desk 2 hours earlier. 8 Marines pinned down in a valley 40 kilometers northwest, Taliban forces closing from 3 sides, artillery support unavailable due to civilian proximity. Standard close air support request, except it wasn't standard at all. The Marines were a SEAL reconnaissance team that had pushed too far into hostile territory, chasing intelligence on a high-value target. Now they were trapped in a kill box with maybe 2 hours of ammunition left, and enemy reinforcements rolling in from the mountain passes. Maya's call sign was Nomad 71, but the Marines in the operations center had a different name for her. She'd heard it through the door during the briefing, the single mom, delivered with just enough edge to make it clear what they thought about a woman with a 6-year-old daughter flying combat missions over Afghanistan. She'd stopped caring about that kind of talk years ago, right around the time her ex-husband walked out because he couldn't handle being married to someone who deployed more than he did. The mission brief was simple on paper: provide close air support, keep the SEALs alive until extraction helicopters could reach them. But Maya had flown enough missions to know that simple on paper meant complicated in the air. The valley was narrow, with steep walls that would make gun runs tricky. The Taliban knew the terrain, knew how to use the rocks and shadows, and the Marines were running out of time. She climbed into the cockpit, settling into the familiar seat, hands finding the controls without conscious thought. The heads-up display flickered to life, painting targeting data across the canopy. Behind her, the twin General Electric turbofans spooled up with a rising whine that rattled her bones. Maya ran through the startup checklist, voice calm and professional on the radio, reporting ready status to the tower. She didn't know that in 36 hours, every Marine in that operations center would remember this moment differently, would remember watching her taxi toward the runway and thinking she was just another pilot on just another mission, completely unaware they were watching something that would change how they thought about courage forever. The tower cleared her for immediate departure. Maya pushed the throttles forward and felt the Warthog surge down the runway, heavy with fuel and Ordnance Maverick missiles under the wings, a full load of 30-millimeter rounds in the nose cannon, enough firepower to level a city block. The aircraft lifted off with the grace of a freight train learning to fly, climbing into the crystalline Afghan sky. She banked northwest, following the GPS coordinates burned into her kneeboard, watching the base shrink behind her. The radio crackled with the usual chatter, supply helicopters coordinating runs, F-16s calling positions, a distant AC-130 gunship checking in from its patrol sector. Maya filtered it all out, focusing on the terrain ahead. The desert gave way to foothills, then to the jagged mountains that formed the spine of the Hindu Kush. She descended to 8,000 feet, low enough to see details, high enough to stay clear of small arms fire. The valley appeared ahead, a knife cut between 2 ridges, maybe half a kilometer wide at the mouth and narrowing to nothing at the far end. She could see dust trails on the northern ridge, vehicles moving into position. Taliban reinforcements, just like the brief said. Maya keyed her radio, voice steady despite the adrenaline starting to pump through her system. Viper 2-6, this is Nomad 7-1, overhead your position, standing by for target coordinates. The response came immediately, tight with stress but controlled. Nomad 7-1, Viper 2-6 actual. We are taking accurate fire from the northern ridgeline, multiple technicals with heavy weapons, Estimate 24 dismounts moving to flank our eastern position. We need immediate suppression. Danger close. Danger close. That meant the enemy was within 600 meters of friendly forces. That meant precision mattered more than firepower. Maya studied the valley through the canopy, eyes picking out the details, the cluster of rocks where the SEALs had taken cover, the line of vehicles creeping along the ridge, the groups of fighters moving through the scree like ants. She'd done this dance before, threading the needle between helping friendlies and hitting them with her own ordnance. "Copy, danger close," she transmitted. "Stand by for gun run, north to south along the ridgeline. Mark your position with smoke." Below, a canister arced from the rocks, spewing violet smoke that caught the wind and spread across the valley floor. Maya banked hard, lining up her approach, watching the distance collapse between her aircraft and the ridge. The targeting computer painted solutions across her display, but she ignored them, trusting her eyes and her instincts. This was the part of the job that separated good pilots from great ones. The ability to put ordnance exactly where it needed to go while screaming through the sky at 300 knots. She rolled inverted, pulling the nose down into a dive that pressed her into the seat with crushing force. The ridge filled her vision, and she could see them now. The Toyota trucks with machine guns mounted in the beds, the fighters crouched behind rocks, the RPG teams tracking her aircraft. Maya's thumb found the trigger, and the GAU-8 Avenger cannon roared to life with a sound like the world being torn in half. The 30mm rounds walked across the ridgeline in a line of explosions, each one the size of a beer bottle, traveling at 3,000 feet per second. The lead truck disintegrated, metal and flesh turned to mist. The second truck tried to flee and caught a burst that cut it in half. Maya pulled out of the dive at 4,000 feet, banking hard to clear the ridgeline, feeling the G-forces drag at her vision. The radio erupted with confirmation. "Good hits, good hits. Northern ridge is suppressed. We've got dismounts breaking east. Request follow-up on the eastern slope." She came around for another pass, this time attacking from the west, cannon fire chewing through the rock and the men hiding behind it. The Warthog shuddered with each burst, the recoil from the cannon actually slowing the aircraft in mid-flight. Maya compensated automatically, adjusting her aim, walking the fire across the slope like a conductor directing an orchestra of destruction. 3 passes. 4. The valley filled with smoke and dust, obscuring her targets, forcing her to rely on the SEALs calling corrections from the ground. "Left 50 meters. Good, good. Hold fire, hold fire." The eastern slope fell silent. Maya climbed back to 8,000 feet, circling the valley, checking her fuel and ammunition. She'd burned through a third of her cannon rounds already, and the Mavericks were still hung on the pylons, waiting for targets worthy of precision-guided munitions. The radio crackled again, different voice this time, younger, with an edge of barely controlled panic. "Nomad 7-1, we have multiple vehicles approaching from the northwest. Estimate 6 technicals with crew-served weapons moving fast. They're going to cut off our extraction route." Maya looked northwest and saw them, a convoy of trucks racing down the mountain road, dust trailing behind them like a comet's tail. They'd be in firing position in 5 minutes, maybe less. The SEALs were already locked down by fire from the south. If that convoy reached the valley mouth, the Marines would be surrounded with no way out. She made the decision in 2 seconds. "Copy. Engaging northwest convoy with Mavericks. Viper 2-6, keep your heads down." The AGM-65 Maverick was a fire-and-forget missile, guided by an infrared seeker that locked onto heat signatures. Maya selected the first missile, waited for the seeker to acquire the lead truck, and felt the satisfying tone that meant lock-on. She squeezed the trigger, and the Maverick dropped from the wing, motor igniting as it accelerated away from her aircraft. The missile covered 3 kilometers in 8 seconds, slamming into the lead truck with enough force to flip it end over end. The explosion sent a pillar of black smoke into the sky. Maya was already locking the second Maverick, already firing, already banking to line up the cannon for cleanup work. The convoy scattered, trucks peeling off in different directions, but she was faster, reading their panic, anticipating their moves. The second Maverick caught a truck trying to reverse course. The cannon got two more that tried to flee across open ground. One truck made it into a ravine and disappeared, but it was running away, not attacking, and that was good enough. The valley fell quiet. Maya circled overhead, scanning for threats, listening to the seals reorganize on the ground. Her fuel gauge showed 50%, enough for another 30 minutes on station before she'd need to hit the tanker or return to base. The ammunition counter showed she'd burned through half her cannon rounds. She had 2 Mavericks left and enough fuel to stay until the extraction birds arrived. The radio crackled. Nomad 7-1, Viper 2-6 actual, that was exceptional shooting. We're consolidating position and preparing for extract. ETA on the helos. Maya checked her display, saw the data link from the operations center. Viper 2-6 extraction birds are inbound, ETA 25 minutes. I'll maintain overwatch until they arrive. Copy that, and Nomad. Thank you. You just saved 8 lives. She didn't respond to that, didn't know what to say. This was the job: keep the people on the ground alive, put ordnance on target, go home. She'd done it 100 times, would do it 100 more if the deployment lasted that long. But something in the team leader's voice caught her attention, a note of genuine respect that she didn't hear often. The next 20 minutes passed in tense silence. Maya circled the valley, watching the approaches, ready to engage any new threats. The SEALs held their position, treating wounded, redistributing ammunition, preparing for the sprint to the landing zone when the helicopters arrived. The Taliban had pulled back, regrouping in the mountains, content to wait for another opportunity. Maya's eyes never stopped moving, scanning the ridges, checking the roads, watching the sky. The extraction helicopters appeared right on schedule, 2 CH-47 Chinooks flying low and fast, rotor wash flattening the vegetation as they flared into the valley. Maya climbed to 10,000 feet, providing overwatch as the SEALs broke cover and sprinted for the birds. 30 seconds on the ground, Marines piling through the rear ramps, wounded first, then the security team. The Chinooks lifted off in a storm of dust and noise, climbing hard, angling south toward friendly territory. Maya stayed overhead until they cleared the valley, until they were safely into the corridor that would take them home. Only then did she turn southeast, throttling up for the flight back to Rhino. The mission had lasted 90 minutes from takeoff to landing. She'd fired 4 Mavericks and expended roughly 800 rounds of 30mm ammunition. The after-action report would list it as a successful close air support mission. 1 SEAL team extracted without casualties, estimated 40 enemy KIA. Standard work for an A-10 pilot. But when Maya taxied back to the flight line and shut down her engines, she found a crowd waiting. Marines she'd never met, ground crew who'd heard the radio chatter, other pilots who'd been monitoring her frequency. They watched her climb down from the cockpit, watched her pull off her helmet, watched her walk across the tarmac with the same methodical precision she'd used for the pre-flight check. Captain Hendricks was there, the same officer who'd called her the single mom 6 hours earlier. He walked up to her and she could see something different in his face, not embarrassment exactly, but recognition. "Staff Sergeant Reeves," he said, voice formal. "That was textbook CAS, best I've seen in 2 deployments." Maya nodded, accepting the compliment without making a big deal of it. "Just doing the job, sir." But Hendricks shook his head. "No, that was more than the job. That was exceptional flying under fire. The team leader wants to meet you if you've got time." She did meet them, later that evening in the operations building. 8 Marines who'd spent the afternoon convinced they were going to die in that valley, now sitting around drinking bad coffee and replaying the mission. They stood when she entered, and the formality of it caught her off guard. The team leader was a gunnery sergeant named Tors, maybe 35, with the kind of weathered face that came from too many deployments in too many bad places. He stuck out his hand, and when Maya shook it, his grip was firm but respectful. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, I'm not going to forget what you did today." Maya felt uncomfortable with the attention, the gratitude. "You would have done the same for me, Gunny." "Maybe, but you were the one who showed up when we needed it. You put ordnance on target while taking fire, danger close, in a narrow valley with limited maneuvering room. That's not easy flying." He paused, looked at the other Marines, then back at her. "We heard what they call you, the single mom, like it's supposed to be an insult." Maya's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes hardened slightly. Torres saw it and continued. I've got 3 kids at home. My wife handles everything when I'm deployed: school, doctor appointments, broken pipes, all of it. I know what it takes to do this job with family waiting. It doesn't make you weaker, it makes you stronger. Because you've got more to lose and you still show up. The words hung in the air between them. Maya nodded slowly, accepting them, feeling something shift in her chest. Thank you, Gunny, that means something. It should, because from now on when we talk about today, we're going to talk about the pilot who saved our lives. Not her gender, not her family situation. Just the pilot who did the job when it mattered most. The other Marines murmured agreement, and Maya saw it in their faces: genuine respect, earned through action, not given through obligation. She'd been flying combat missions for 7 years, had logged over 300 hours of combat time, had put ordnance on target in Iraq and Afghanistan, and half a dozen other places whose names were still classified. But this was the first time she'd felt truly seen by the people she was protecting. The conversation moved to tactics, to the details of the mission, to the way Maya had threaded her gun runs through the valley like a surgeon working with a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. Torres pulled out a map and traced the routes she'd flown, pointing out the places where she could have taken easier shots, faster shots, safer shots, and how each of those choices would have put the SEALs at greater risk. You prioritized our safety over yours, he said. That's not common. Most pilots are good, but they're also protecting themselves, protecting their aircraft. You flew like you trusted us to call accurate corrections, and we trusted you to put the rounds exactly where we needed them. Maya listened, processing the analysis, seeing her own decision-making reflected back through the lens of the people on the ground. It was strange and humbling, this conversation. Usually the pilots and the ground forces existed in separate worlds. The pilots overhead, untouchable, delivering fire from the sky. The ground forces down in the dirt, dealing with the immediate, visceral reality of combat. But here now those worlds were overlapping, and Maya was seeing her work from a completely different perspective. One of the younger Marines, a corporal with a fresh scar across his jaw, spoke up. "Can I ask you something, ma'am?" Maya nodded. "Did you have any doubt, when you saw how tight that valley was, when you saw how close we were to the enemy positions, did you think about waving off, telling us you couldn't get the shots?" The question was earnest, genuinely curious. Maya considered it carefully before answering. "I thought about the difficulty, calculated the risks, but wave off. No, you called for help and I had the ordnance to provide it. The job isn't to only take easy missions, it's to take the missions that need flying even when they're hard." The corporal nodded, satisfied with the answer. Torres smiled slightly, and Maya realized he'd put the kid up to asking the question, wanted to hear her philosophy, her approach to the work. The conversation continued for another hour, eventually drifting to other topics: deployments, families, the strange disconnection between life at home and life in theater. Maya found herself talking about her daughter, Lily, 6 years old and obsessed with airplanes because of her mother's job. The Marines shared their own stories, and the walls between ranks and specialties dissolved in the shared experience of serving far from home. When Maya finally left the operations building, the desert night had turned cold, stars brilliant in the unpolluted sky. She walked back to her quarters, thinking about Torres' words, about being seen for the work rather than the demographics. It shouldn't have mattered. She knew her worth, knew her capabilities, but it did matter, more than she wanted to admit. The next morning brought new mission briefs, new target packages, the endless cycle of deployment. But Maya noticed something different in the way the Marines looked at her when she walked through the operations center, in the way the other pilots asked about her tactics from the previous day's mission. The story was spreading, the way stories do in small communities under stress. The single mom who flew danger-close missions in narrow valleys, who put rounds on target while taking fire, who stayed overhead until the extraction birds were safely away. Captain Hendricks caught her during the afternoon brief, pulled her aside with an awkward formality that suggested he'd been rehearsing the conversation. "Staff Sergeant Reeves, I owe you an apology. The comment yesterday about being a single mom, that was out of line, unprofessional. Maya studied him for a moment, seeing genuine discomfort in his expression. Apology accepted, sir. But for what it's worth, I am a single mom. That's not an insult unless you mean it to be one. I did mean it as one. That's the problem. I made assumptions about your capabilities based on your personal situation, and I was wrong. You're one of the best CAS pilots I've worked with, and that has nothing to do with anything except your skill and dedication. He paused, seeming to struggle with the next part. I've requested that you be our primary air support for future special operations missions in this sector. The SEAL teams trust you, and trust matters more than anything else in this work. Maya felt something unexpected, not pride exactly, but validation. Recognition that the work spoke for itself, that competence eventually overwhelmed prejudice. Thank you, sir. I appreciate the confidence. Hendricks nodded and walked away, leaving Maya standing in the hallway, processing the conversation. 3 days later, she was back in the air, same valley, different SEAL team. This time, they were hunting a Taliban commander who'd been coordinating attacks across the province, and the intelligence said he was holed up in a compound at the valley's northern end. Maya arrived overhead at dawn, the mountains casting long shadows across the terrain. The radio chatter was different this time, more relaxed, more confident. The SEALs on the ground knew her reputation now, knew she'd keep them safe. Nomad 71, Viper 32, we're beginning our approach to the target compound. Request you hold high station and be ready for immediate support if we hit resistance. Copy, Viper 32. I've got you covered. She circled at 12,000 feet, watching the team move through the valley like shadows, invisible from her altitude but tracked through the data link that connected her aircraft to their ground units. The compound appeared ahead, a cluster of mud brick buildings surrounded by a low wall. Intel said the commander was inside with maybe a dozen fighters. The SEALs reached the outer wall without contact, breached the gate, began clearing rooms. Maya watched and waited, finger resting lightly on the trigger, ready to engage if things went sideways. They didn't. The SEALs found the compound empty, the commander gone, fled sometime in the night. They searched the buildings, collected documents and equipment, and prepared to withdraw. Maya maintained overwatch, scanning the approaches, watching for the ambush that never came. The flight back to Rhino was uneventful, but the mission mattered because of what it represented: trust built through competence. The SEALs confident enough in her abilities to focus entirely on their own work without worrying about air support. That trust would be tested 2 weeks later in circumstances nobody anticipated. Maya was running a routine patrol along the Pakistani border, checking grid coordinates where intelligence suggested Taliban supply routes crossed into Afghanistan. It was milk run work, the kind of mission designed to show presence without necessarily expecting contact. The radio call came at 14:30 hours, emergency frequency, voice tight with controlled panic. Any station this net, this is Viper 16, troops in contact, request immediate close air support, grid follows. Maya's blood went cold. She knew that call sign. Viper 16 was the SEAL team Torres commanded, the same team she'd saved 3 weeks earlier. They were supposed to be conducting a reconnaissance mission in the mountains, observing enemy movement, staying hidden. Something had gone catastrophically wrong. She banked hard toward the coordinates, pushing the throttles to maximum, watching the Warthog accelerate to its top speed of 400 knots. Viper 16, Nomad 71, I'm 8 minutes out, what's your situation? Tor's voice came back immediately, and Maya could hear small arms fire in the background, the distinctive crack of AK-47s mixed with the deeper boom of RPGs. Nomad 71, we walked into an ambush, 20+ enemy fighters. We're taking accurate fire from multiple directions. 1 critical casualty. We need immediate suppression to break contact and move to extract LZ. Copy, stand by. 8 minutes. The mountains blurred beneath her, the aircraft shaking slightly as she pushed it beyond normal cruise speed. Maya ran through the tactical picture in her mind: SEALs pinned down, taking fire, 1 critically wounded, needing to move but unable to break contact. She'd need to suppress the enemy positions while the team displaced, then provide cover for their movement to the landing zone. Complex, dangerous, the kind of mission where timing mattered more than firepower. 7 minutes. She checked her ordnance full load of Mavericks, full ammunition for the cannon. Fuel was good for 90 minutes on station. The extraction helicopters were spinning up at the forward base, 20 minutes behind her. She had to keep the SEALs alive until the birds arrived. 6 minutes. The terrain was getting rougher, mountains rising to 14,000 feet, valleys so deep the afternoon sun never reached the bottom. She climbed to 15,000, needing altitude for the gun runs, needing to see the whole battlefield before she committed. 5 minutes. Torres came back on the radio, voice still controlled but strain bleeding through. Nomad 7-1, enemy is maneuvering to cut off our withdrawal route. We need fires on the western ridge, danger close, within 100 meters of our position. Danger close within 100 meters. That was nearly point-blank range in aviation terms, the margin for error measured in seconds and meters. One mistake and she'd kill the people she was trying to save. 4 minutes. Maya could see smoke ahead, the dark smudge against the mountainside that marked the contact. She descended to 12,000 feet, studying the terrain, picking out the details. 3 minutes. The battlefield resolved into clarity, a narrow valley with steep sides, SEALs in a cluster of rocks at the southern end, enemy fighters spread across the western ridge and moving to encircle from the north. The tactical situation was dire. The enemy had numbers and position, and they were pressing the advantage. 2 minutes. Maya rolled into her first attack run, pulling the nose down into a 60-degree dive, watching the western ridge fill her canopy. The targeting computer painted solutions, but she ignored it, trusting her eyes, trusting her judgment. The ridge was crawling with fighters, maybe 30 or 40, some behind rocks, some standing in the open, all firing down at the pinned SEALs. 1 minute. She reached the trigger discipline point, the moment where instinct and training merged into pure action. Her thumb found the trigger, and the GAU-8 roared to life, 30-millimeter rounds tearing across the western ridge in a line of explosions. She walked the fire from north to south, chewing through rock and flesh, suppressing the entire ridgeline in one devastating pass. The radio erupted. Good hits, good hits. Western ridge is suppressed, we're moving now. Maya pulled out of the dive at 8,000 feet, banking hard to come around for another pass. Below, she could see the SEALs breaking from their position, moving in a tactical column toward the extraction landing zone 200 meters south. But the enemy wasn't finished. Fighters appeared on the northern ridge, RPGs tracking the moving SEALs, machine gun fire kicking up dust around the running men. Maya reversed her turn, lining up on the northern ridge, diving again, finger already on the trigger. The cannon thundered, rounds impacting among the enemy positions, silencing the machine guns, scattering the RPG teams. But this time she took fire in return, tracer rounds arcing up toward her aircraft, one stream passing close enough that she could see the rounds through the canopy. The Warthog shuddered as something impacted the left wing, but the aircraft kept flying, kept responding to her inputs. She completed the pass and climbed, checking her systems. Caution lights flickered on the panel, hydraulic pressure fluctuation, slight control lag in the left aileron. Maya keyed the radio, voice calm despite the adrenaline. Viper 1-6, you've got more fighters moving in from the east, I'm engaging now. She came around for a third pass, this time attacking from altitude, using a Maverick to take out a technical that had appeared on the eastern approach. The missile left a smoke trail across the sky, detonating against the truck in a ball of orange fire. The enemy scattered, broke, began withdrawing into the mountains. The SEALs reached the landing zone, set up a defensive perimeter, began treating their wounded. Maya circled overhead, scanning for threats, managing her fuel, watching the caution lights on her panel multiply. More hydraulic warnings, engine temperature rising on the left turbofan, flight controls getting sluggish. She'd taken more damage than she initially thought, probably from that stream of tracer rounds during the second pass. The Warthog could take tremendous punishment. The titanium bathtub protecting the cockpit was designed to withstand hits from 23mm cannon fire, but even the Warthog had limits. The extraction helicopters appeared, right on schedule, Chinooks flying low through the valleys. Maya climbed to 14,000 feet, giving them room to work, watching as the SEALs loaded their wounded and mounted up. The whole extraction took 90 seconds, and then the birds were lifting off, rotors clawing at the thin mountain air, climbing hard for friendly territory. Maya stayed overhead until they were clear, until they were safely into the protected corridor, only then turning southeast for the long flight back to Rhino. The Warthog was flying wrong now, controls mushy, requiring constant attention to maintain altitude and heading. The left engine temperature was redlining, and she shut it down, feathering the prop, continuing on single-engine power. Oil pressure was dropping on the right engine. Fuel was leaking from somewhere, the gauge showing a faster decrease than consumption alone could explain. She ran through emergency procedures, managing systems, prioritizing failures, calculating whether she could make it back to base or needed to divert to a closer field. The math said she'd make it barely if nothing else broke. She focused on flying, on keeping the aircraft stable, on maintaining altitude. The radio crackled with transmissions from the base, asking for status updates, offering vectors to emergency fields. Maya kept her responses minimal, professional, focused on the immediate task of keeping the damaged aircraft flying. Behind her, somewhere in the mountains she was leaving behind, 8 SEALs were flying home because she'd arrived when they needed her, had put ordnance on target while taking fire, had absorbed damage to her aircraft while keeping them alive. The thought helped her focus, pushed back the fear that was trying to creep in around the edges of her concentration. The desert appeared ahead, the fob a smudge on the horizon, growing slowly larger. Maya descended carefully, feeling the aircraft respond sluggishly to her inputs, compensating for the missing engine, managing the fuel to keep the remaining engine running. Tower cleared her for priority landing, emergency crews rolling onto the runway, preparing for the worst. She lined up on final approach, gear down, flaps extended, fighting the Warthog's tendency to drift left with the dead engine. The runway appeared in her windscreen, and she focused on the touchdown point, on maintaining airspeed, on flying the aircraft all the way to the ground. The wheels kissed the pavement with barely a bump, and Maya let the aircraft roll, not trusting the brakes with the hydraulic damage. She rolled to the far end of the runway before bringing the Warthog to a stop, shutting down the remaining engine, listening to the turbine wind down in the sudden silence. The emergency crews surrounded the aircraft immediately, checking for fire, inspecting the damage. Maya sat in the cockpit for a long moment, hands still gripping the controls, breathing deeply, feeling the adrenaline slowly drain from her system. She'd been flying for 2 hours and 30 minutes, 20 minutes of which had been under fire, managing a crippled aircraft while providing close air support for troops in contact. When she finally climbed down from the cockpit, she saw the damage for the first time. The left wing was torn, metal peeled back where multiple rounds had punched through the structure. The left engine cowling was shredded, pieces missing, the turbine blades visible and damaged. Hydraulic fluid pooled under the fuselage, and fuel still dripped from punctured tanks. The crew chief walked around the aircraft, shaking his head in disbelief. "Ma'am, I don't know how you flew this thing home. You've got structural damage to the wing spar, both hydraulic systems compromised, fuel system breached in 3 places, and engine damage that should have caused a catastrophic failure." Maya looked at the wreckage that had been her aircraft, feeling a strange disconnect between what she'd experienced in the air and what she was seeing on the ground. It kept flying. That's all that mattered. The crew chief nodded slowly. "That's the Warthog for you, built to take damage and keep fighting. But ma'am, you did good work keeping it in the air. Lesser pilots would have punched out." She didn't respond to that, didn't know how to process the compliment. She was exhausted, wrung out, running on empty. But there was still the debrief to complete, the after-action report to file, the conversation with maintenance about what had happened and how bad the damage really was. Captain Hendricks found her in the operations center 2 hours later, after she'd completed the initial debrief, after she'd given her statement to the investigating officers, after she'd finally had time to sit down with a cup of coffee and process what had happened. Staff Sergeant Reeves, I just got off the radio with Viper 16. Gunnery Sergeant Torres wanted me to pass along a message. Maya looked up, waiting. He said to tell you that you saved his team twice now, and he's running out of ways to say thank you. The wounded SEAL is stable, going to make a full recovery, and that's because you kept the enemy suppressed long enough for the medic to work. Maya nodded, accepting the information without comment. Hendricks continued. He also said to tell you that taking fire to protect his team flying a damaged aircraft home so you could complete the mission, that's the definition of valor. He's putting you in for a distinguished flying cross. The words took a moment to register. The DFC was one of the highest awards for aviation valor, given for heroism or extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight. Maya had never expected to be recommended for anything beyond routine commendations. Sir, I was just doing the job. The aircraft took damage, but that's what it's built for. I flew it home because that was the safest option for everyone involved. Hendricks smiled slightly. I know. That's exactly why you deserve the recognition. You don't see it as heroic because you see it as the job, but the rest of us see it differently. We see a pilot who put herself at risk to protect Marines on the ground, who absorbed enemy fire while delivering precision ordnance danger close, who flew a crippled aircraft home rather than abandoning it and potentially putting others at risk with an ejection over hostile territory. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. When you first arrived at this fob, I had opinions about you. Those opinions were wrong. You've proven yourself to be one of the most capable combat pilots I've worked with, and your gender or family situation has nothing to do with it. It's your skill, your judgment, your willingness to take on the hard missions and execute them flawlessly under fire. That's what matters. Maya felt something shift in her chest, a weight she hadn't known she was carrying suddenly lighter. Thank you, sir. That means a lot. The next weeks passed in a blur of missions and maintenance and the slow bureaucracy of military awards. The DFC recommendation moved up the chain, gathering endorsements from the SEAL teams, from the operations staff, from pilots who reviewed the mission footage and tactical data. Maya's damaged Warthog was stripped down to the airframe, repaired with new parts and systems, tested and certified airworthy again. She flew other missions while her aircraft was down, borrowing planes from the maintenance pool, continuing the work of providing close air support across the province. But something had changed in the way people treated her, the way they looked at her when she walked through the operations center. The story of the second mission had spread, growing with each retelling. The pilot who took fire-protecting SEALs, who flew home on one engine with a wing torn to pieces, who landed safely and walked away without a scratch. The details were exaggerated in some versions, minimized in others, but the core truth remained. She'd done the job when it mattered most, had put the mission and the Marines ahead of her own safety. Torres and his team returned to the FOB a month after the mission, rotating back from their forward position for resupply and rest. They found Maya in the maintenance hangar, watching the crew chief run final checks on her rebuilt Warthog. Torres approached with his characteristic directness, no preamble or small talk. Staff Sergeant Reeves, got a minute? Maya turned, saw the 8 Marines standing behind him, the same team she'd protected twice now. Gunny, good to see you back safe. Thanks to you. He gestured to the Warthog. Heard they put her back together, she ready to fly. Crew chief says she's better than new. Fresh engines, new hydraulics, reinforced wing structure. I'm taking her up tomorrow for a test flight. Torres nodded, then pulled something from his pocket, a patch, embroidered with the SEAL trident and the words Viper 16 above a stylized A-10 silhouette. We wanted to give you this. It's our team patch, but we had a special one made. For the pilot who saved our lives twice and counting. Maya took the patch, feeling the weight of it, the meaning behind the gesture. Team patches were sacred in the special operations community, given only to members of the team or to individuals who'd earned a place in their history. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything. Just keep doing what you do. Keep showing up when we call. Keep putting rounds on target. Keep being the pilot we trust more than anyone else in theater. One of the younger SEALs spoke up, the same corporal who'd asked about doubt during their first conversation. "Ma'am, can I ask you something?" Maya nodded. "When you took fire during that second mission when you knew your aircraft was damaged, did you think about punching out? About ejecting and letting someone else finish the mission?" She considered the question, remembering the moment when the tracer rounds passed her canopy, when the first caution lights appeared on her panel. "I thought about the tactical situation, about what would happen if I ejected. The mission would be incomplete, you'd still be under fire, the extraction birds would be delayed while rescue assets came to get me. Punching out would have made the situation worse for everyone except me. So you stayed in a damaged aircraft under fire to complete the mission." "I stayed because leaving would have failed you, and failing wasn't an option." The corporal nodded slowly, and Maya saw something in his expression, not hero worship, which would have made her uncomfortable but understanding. Recognition that the job sometimes demanded more than seemed reasonable, and that the best people did it anyway. The conversation continued, technical details about the mission, about the damage, about the flight home on one engine. Maya found herself opening up more than usual, sharing the experience from her perspective, the calculations and decisions that had seemed so clear in the moment but looked different in retrospect. "The thing about the Warthog," she said, "is that it's built to absorb damage. The designers knew it would be flying low and slow in hostile environments, taking fire from everything from small arms to anti-aircraft artillery. So they made it redundant duplicate flight controls, armored cockpit, engines positioned to protect each other. When I took those hits, I knew the aircraft could handle it. I just had to fly it properly." Torres smiled. "That's exactly the kind of confidence we need from our air support. Not recklessness, but calculated risk-taking based on knowing your aircraft and your capabilities." The team stayed for another hour, eventually drifting to other topics, other deployments, the shared language of people who'd seen combat and understood its specific weight. When they finally left, Maya remained in the hangar, looking at her rebuilt Warthog, running her hand along the new panels that covered the repairs. The aircraft looked the same from a distance, but up close she could see the evidence of what it had survived: different shades of paint, where new metal replaced old, subtle misalignments, where components had been replaced, the ghost of violence written in fasteners and rivets. She thought about Lily, her daughter back home, 6 years old and growing up fast. They talked on video calls when bandwidth allowed, and Lily always wanted to hear stories about flying, about the Warthog, about what it was like to work in the sky. Maya had always been careful about what she shared, editing out the danger, the fear, the moments when death felt very close. But she wondered what Lily would think someday when she was old enough to understand what her mother had really done during these deployments. Would she be proud, afraid, angry that Maya had taken such risks? The questions had no easy answers, but they mattered in a way that mission briefs and tactical decisions didn't. The test flight the next morning went perfectly. The Warthog flew like new, responsive, and solid, all systems performing within specifications. Maya ran through every check, tested every control surface, pushed the engines through their full power range. She flew north into the mountains, following the same routes she'd flown during the missions with Tor's team, seeing the valleys and ridges from a different perspective now, without the immediate pressure of troops in contact. The flight lasted 2 hours, and when she landed back at Rhino, the crew chief was waiting with a thumbs up and a smile. "She's good, ma'am. Better than good. This bird will outlast all of us." Maya climbed down from the cockpit, feeling the satisfaction of a job completed, a machine restored to fighting condition. But she also felt something else, a growing awareness that she was part of something larger than individual missions, larger than personal achievement. She was part of a tradition of pilots who'd flown close air support in every conflict since aircraft had mounted guns, who'd put themselves at risk to protect people on the ground, who'd absorbed damage and kept flying because the mission demanded it. The DFC recommendation continued moving through the bureaucracy, but Maya didn't think about it much. The award would come or it wouldn't, but either way, the work continued. 3 days after her test flight, she was back in the air, providing overwatch for a Marine convoy moving through contested territory. Standard mission, no contact, but her presence overhead meant the convoy could move with confidence. 2 days after that, another mission with a different SEAL team, reconnaissance support in the mountains. 5 days after that, emergency close air support for an Army patrol that had stumbled into an ambush. The rhythm of deployment continued, each mission different in details but similar in essence: aircraft and ordnance, and the constant calculation of risk versus reward. Maya flew them all with the same methodical precision, the same focus on execution, the same willingness to absorb risk if it meant protecting the people depending on her. Word spread through the theater about the A-10 pilot who'd flown home on one engine, who'd been recommended for the DFC, who had a perfect record of successful close air support missions. Other pilots asked her about tactics, about decision-making under fire, about managing damaged aircraft. She shared what she knew, never claiming special expertise, just explaining how she approached the work. "Trust your training," she told a younger pilot who was nervous about his first combat deployment. "Trust your aircraft. Trust the people on the ground to call accurate corrections. And when things go wrong, because they will go wrong, focus on the next decision, the next action, the next moment. You can't control the whole situation, but you can control how you respond to it." The advice seemed to help, and Maya found herself in an unexpected role: mentor to newer pilots, voice of experience for people who were trying to figure out how to do the job effectively. She'd never sought the role, but it felt natural, a way of passing along the lessons she'd learned through experience and occasionally through mistakes. 6 weeks after the second mission with Tor's team, Maya received orders to return home. Her deployment was complete, 6 months in theater, over 400 hours of combat flight time, 47 missions flown. She packed her gear with mixed feelings: relief at going home to see Lily, sadness at leaving the work unfinished, uncertainty about what came next. The night before her flight out, there was an informal gathering at the operations building: pilots and ground crews, and the Marines she'd worked with over the deployment. No speeches, no formal ceremony, just people sharing drinks and stories and the easy camaraderie of shared experience. Tors found her near the end of the evening, pulled her aside with a serious expression. "Before you leave, I wanted to tell you something." Maya waited, curious about his tone. "When we first heard we'd be working with you, some of the team had doubts. Not about your flying, about whether a female pilot would be as aggressive, as willing to take risks as male pilots. It was stupid thinking, but it was there." He paused, meeting her eyes directly. "You proved us wrong in every way possible. You're the most aggressive CAS pilot I've worked with in 3 deployments. You take calculated risks that most pilots wouldn't consider. And you do it with a level of precision and professionalism that puts everyone else to shame. Gender has nothing to do with it, you're just that good." Maya felt the weight of the confession, the honesty behind it. "Thank you for telling me that, and thank you for giving me the chance to prove myself." "You didn't prove yourself to us. You proved us wrong about our own assumptions. That's more valuable." They shook hands, and Maya saw in his face the respect she'd earned through action, through competence demonstrated under fire. It meant more than any award, more than any official recognition. The flight home was long and uncomfortable: military transport with stops in 3 countries before finally reaching the United States. Maya spent the time thinking about the deployment, about the missions, about the moments that had mattered. She thought about the first rescue of Tor's team, about the second mission where she'd taken fire, about the smaller missions that had passed without incident but had still required her full attention and skill. She thought about Lily, waiting at home with Maya's mother, probably bouncing off the walls with excitement about her mother's return. The homecoming was everything and nothing like she'd expected. Lily was bigger, taller, more articulate. Maya's mother looked older, more tired from 6 months of single-handedly managing an energetic 6-year-old. The house was the same but felt different, smaller somehow, quieter than the constant noise of the fob. Maya struggled with the transition, the way all returning veterans do the disconnect between the intensity of deployment and the mundane reality of civilian life. Grocery shopping felt absurd after flying combat missions. Traffic jams seemed laughable after navigating through hostile airspace. The concerns of everyday life bills, appointments, household repairs felt simultaneously important and trivial. But Lily helped ground her, helped bridge the gap between worlds. Her daughter wanted to hear everything about flying, about the warthog, about what it was like to work in the sky. Maya told her edited versions of the stories, left out the danger and the fear, focused on the technical details and the beauty of flight. "Did you fly upside down, Mommy?" Lily asked one evening, snuggled against Maya on the couch. "Sometimes, when I needed to dive quickly to reach my target." The warthog can fly upside down, but it's not as comfortable as flying right side up. Were you scared? The question hit harder than Maya expected. She thought about how to answer honestly without worrying her daughter. "Sometimes, but I was more focused than scared. When you're flying, you have to pay attention to so many things at once: where you are, where you're going, what the aircraft is doing, what's happening on the ground. There's not much time left over for being scared." Lily seemed satisfied with that answer, and the conversation moved to other topics. But the question lingered in Maya's mind, prompting deeper reflection about fear and courage and what it meant to do dangerous work. 3 months after her return, the DFC came through. The ceremony was small, held at the Air Force Base where she was stationed, attended by her squadron, some local dignitaries, and Lily, who wore her best dress and beamed with pride. The citation read aloud during the ceremony described the mission in clinical language: enemy forces engaged, ordnance delivered, aircraft damage sustained and overcome, mission completed successfully. But Maya heard it differently, heard the story beneath the official language. The fear she'd pushed aside, the calculations made in seconds, the determination to complete the mission despite the cost. When the medal was pinned to her uniform, Maya thought about Tors and his team, about the young corporal who'd asked about doubt, about all the people on the ground who depended on pilots like her to show up when called. The medal wasn't really hers. It belonged to all of them, to the collective effort that made dangerous missions possible. Lily was fascinated by the medal, wanted to hold it, wanted to know what each element meant. Maya explained the design, the symbolism, the meaning behind the award. "Does this mean you're a hero, Mommy?" Maya considered the question carefully. "It means I did my job well in a difficult situation. The real heroes are the people on the ground, the ones in danger, the ones who can't fly away when things get bad." "But you didn't fly away." "Gunny Tors told me. He came to the ceremony. He said you stayed even when your airplane was hurt." Maya hadn't realized Tors had made the trip, hadn't seen him in the crowd. She looked around and spotted him near the back in dress uniform, standing with 3 other SEALs from his team. He met her eyes and nodded, a gesture of respect and recognition. After the ceremony, Tors approached with his characteristic directness. "Congratulations on the medal. Well deserved. Thank you for coming. It means a lot that you made the trip. Wouldn't have missed it. Besides, I wanted to meet the famous Lily. Your mom talks about you all the time." Lily, who'd been hiding behind Maya's leg, peeked out at the mention of her name. Tors crouched down to her level, smiled warmly. "Your mom is one of the bravest pilots I've ever worked with. You should be very proud of her." "I am," Lily declared, suddenly confident. "She flies the warthog and helps people, and she's not scared of anything." Tors glanced up at Maya, something knowing in his expression. "That's right. She helps people. That's the most important part." The conversation continued, Tors sharing carefully edited deployment stories that made Lily laugh, Maya watching her daughter interact with the SEAL who'd been on the other end of the radio during her most intense missions. It felt surreal, these two parts of her life intersecting, the barrier between deployment and home becoming permeable. Later, after the ceremony, after Lily had fallen asleep clutching the metal case, Maya sat on her porch and thought about the future. She had another deployment scheduled in 8 months, another rotation to Afghanistan or possibly Iraq. More missions, more danger, more time away from Lily. The choice to continue felt complicated in ways it hadn't before Lily was born. When Maya had been single, the decision to deploy was purely professional. She was a pilot. Deployments were part of the job, end of discussion. But with a daughter, the calculation changed. Every mission carried the risk that she wouldn't come home, that Lily would grow up without a mother, that the choice to serve would have permanent consequences. Yet Maya couldn't imagine not deploying, not doing the work. She thought about Tor's team, about the young corporal, about all the people on the ground who depended on close air support to survive contact with the enemy. If she didn't deploy, someone else would, maybe someone less experienced, less willing to take the hard missions, less capable of delivering precision ordnance under fire. Her absence would create a gap, and gaps in combat operations got people killed. So she would deploy again. Would train hard in the months beforehand, would say goodbye to Lily again, would fly into hostile airspace again. Because the work mattered, because competence mattered, because showing up when called was the foundation of military service. The next months passed in training and preparation. Maya flew practice missions, refined her tactics, worked with new pilots to share lessons learned. She spent time with Lily, tried to pack months of parenting into the weeks before deployment, tried to build memories that would sustain them both through the separation. Lily understood more this time, understood that Mommy was leaving again, that it would be months before they saw each other. She cried the night before Maya's departure, asked why Mommy had to go, why the job was more important than staying home. Maya held her daughter and tried to explain in 6-year-old terms what service meant, what duty meant, why some people chose to do dangerous work. Remember Gunny Tors, the man at the medal ceremony. He and his friends go into very dangerous places, and when they're there, they need help. My job is to provide that help, to keep them safe so they can come home to their families. If I don't do that job, someone else has to, and I'm very good at that job, so I should be the one doing it. Lily sniffled, processing this. But what if something bad happens to you? I'm very careful. My airplane is very strong, and I have a lot of training and experience. I'm going to do everything I can to come home safe. It wasn't a promise. Maya had seen too much combat to make promises about survival, but it was a commitment, a statement of intent that she hoped would be enough. The second deployment was different from the first. Maya arrived in theater with a reputation, with a DFC on her record, with Marines who specifically requested her for air support missions. The operations tempo was higher, the missions more complex, the risks more carefully managed because everyone understood what she was capable of delivering. She flew with Tor's team 3 times in the first month, each mission successful, each one reinforcing the trust and communication they'd built during the previous deployment. The fourth mission with them went sideways in ways nobody anticipated. The target was a Taliban commander who'd been orchestrating IED attacks along major supply routes. Intelligence said he was meeting with subordinates in a compound near the Pakistani border, and Tor's team was tasked with capture or kill. Maya provided overwatch, circling at altitude while the SEALs moved into position. The insertion went perfectly fast, ropes from helicopters at midnight, the team on the ground, and moving toward the compound before the enemy knew they were there. Maya watched through her targeting pod, the thermal imagery showing the SEALs as white figures moving through a gray landscape, heading toward the compound that glowed with the heat signatures of multiple people inside. The SEALs breached the compound, began clearing rooms. Maya heard the controlled chaos on the radio room: clear, moving, contact, shots fired. Standard raid communications, nothing unexpected. Then Tor's voice, tight with urgency. Nomad 7-1, we've got a problem. This isn't the commander, it's a training camp. We're looking at 40-plus fighting-age males, weapons everywhere, and we just woke them all up. Maya's blood went cold. The intelligence had been wrong. Instead of capturing one commander with a handful of guards, the SEALs had walked into a hornet's nest. Viper 1-6, can you exfiltrate? Negative, they're between us and the extract point and they're organizing fast. We need immediate fire support to break their response and create an exit corridor. Maya was already diving, already lining up her first gun run, already calculating angles and distances. The compound was large, multiple buildings surrounding a central courtyard. The SEALs were in the northern building, Taliban fighters pouring out of the southern and eastern structures. She'd need to suppress the enemy without hitting the building where friendlies were located. Danger close didn't begin to describe it. She opened up with the cannon, walking fire across the courtyard, cutting down fighters as they emerged from the buildings. The GAU-8 roared, 30mm rounds turning the courtyard into a killing ground. She pulled up, came around for another pass, this time targeting the southern building where most of the enemy seemed to be concentrated. The radio crackled with updates from Tors. Good hits, courtyard is clear, but we've got fighters in the buildings, taking fire from windows and roof positions. We're moving to the western wall, need suppression on the eastern building. Maya rolled into another attack, this time threading the needle between buildings, putting cannon fire through the windows of the eastern structure. The Warthog shuddered as she fired, the recoil slowing the aircraft, the targeting display tracking her rounds into the building. She could see return fire now, muzzle flashes from multiple positions, tracers arcing toward her aircraft. One stream passed close enough to rattle her nerves, but she stayed focused, completed the pass, pulled up and away. The SEALs were moving now, fighting their way toward the western wall, trying to create distance between themselves and the enemy. Maya provided continuous fire support, alternating between cannon runs and maverick strikes, keeping the Taliban suppressed while the team displaced. She'd been on station for 20 minutes when the first RPG locked onto her aircraft. The warning tone screamed in her headset missile launch, infrared signature, tracking her heat signature. Maya broke hard right, popping flares, watching the missile chase the decoys and detonate harmlessly 200 meters away. But now the enemy knew to target the aircraft, and the next attack run drew fire from multiple RPG teams. She jinked and weaved, making herself a difficult target, but she couldn't break off. The SEALs were still in contact, still fighting their way out. Another missile launch, another evasion, another flare deployment. Maya's training took over, muscle memory and instinct managing the defensive maneuvers while her conscious mind stayed focused on the mission. She continued her attacks, continued suppressing the enemy, continued creating the corridor the SEALs needed to escape. Tor's voice on the radio calmer now. Nomad 7-1, we're clear of the compound, moving to alternate extract point Charlie. We need you to keep them off our backs for another 10 minutes. Copy, staying overhead. Maya circled the compound, watching for pursuit, ready to engage any forces that tried to follow the SEALs. The Taliban were regrouping, but they'd taken heavy casualties, and their response was disorganized. She put a Maverick into a truck that tried to leave the compound, sent a message that pursuit would be costly. The extraction helicopters arrived exactly on time, and the SEALs loaded up without incident. Maya stayed overhead until they were clear, until they were safely away from the border, only then turning south for the flight back to base. The after-action review was intense. The intelligence failure was dissected, analyzed, assigned blame. But nobody questioned Maya's performance. She'd kept the SEALs alive in a situation that should have been catastrophic, had delivered precision fire danger close while taking fire from multiple sources, had managed missile threats while maintaining focus on the ground situation. Tors found her after the debrief, expression serious. That was as bad as it gets. We were minutes away from being overrun. Maya nodded. The intel was wrong. But you handled it well, kept the team together, created opportunities for me to support you. We handled it well because you were overhead. If that had been anyone else, if they'd broken off when the RPGs started flying, we'd have been in serious trouble. Breaking off wasn't an option. I know. That's why we request you specifically for our missions, because we know you won't break off, won't abandon us, won't put your own safety ahead of the mission. The words carried weight, acknowledgement of trust earned through repeated action. Maya felt the responsibility of it, the burden of being someone people depended on in life-or-death situations. The deployment continued for another 4 months, missions blending together into a continuous cycle of briefings and flights and debriefs. Maya flew 63 combat missions during that deployment, put ordnance on target in 42 of them, took fire on 17 occasions. She became known throughout the theater as the pilot to request for the hard missions, for the danger-close situations, for the times when precision mattered more than volume of fire. But the cost of that reputation was constant stress, constant alertness, the accumulated weight of making life-or-death decisions in split seconds. Maya felt it building, felt the edge of burnout approaching, managed it through discipline and focus, and the knowledge that people were depending on her. The second homecoming was harder than the first. Lily was 7 now, more aware, more capable of understanding that her mother had been in danger. The reunion was joyful but complicated by Lily's questions about deployment, about the missions, about why Mommy kept leaving. Maya struggled to find answers that were honest but not frightening, that acknowledged the reality without burdening her daughter with the full weight of what combat actually meant. 6 months after returning, Maya received notice that she'd been selected for promotion to technical sergeant. The promotion meant more responsibility, more complex missions, likely a move to a position training other pilots. It also meant the option to step back from combat deployments, to take a staff position, to reduce the operational tempo. She thought about it carefully, weighed the options, discussed it with her mother and with Lily. The decision came down to a simple question. Was she done with the work? She wasn't. Despite the stress, despite the time away from Lily, despite the accumulated weight of combat missions, Maya still felt the pull of the job, still believed in the importance of the work. The promotion ceremony was smaller than the DFC ceremony, just her squadron and close colleagues. But Torres was there again, now promoted to Master Sergeant between deployments but still actively serving. He approached after the ceremony with a familiar directness. "Congratulations, Technical Sergeant Reeves. Well deserved. Thank you. I didn't expect to see you here. I'm stationed at Coronado now, training the next generation of SEALs. Part of that training is teaching them about effective air-ground coordination. I use your missions as case studies, show them what right looks like." Maya felt surprised and honored. "I'm just one pilot among many. You're the pilot who's never failed a mission, who's never abandoned people on the ground, who's flown damaged aircraft home rather than punching out. That makes you more than just one pilot." The conversation continued, drifting to the future, to the possibility of them working together again on the next deployment cycle. Torres was scheduled to deploy in 8 months, Maya in 10. The timelines might overlap, might create opportunities for them to work together again. 2 months later, Maya received orders for a new assignment instructor pilot at the Air Force Weapons School, teaching advanced close air support tactics. The position was prestigious, career-enhancing, and would keep her stateside for at least 2 years. It meant no deployments, no combat missions, no time away from Lily. It also meant stepping back from operational flying, from the work she'd built her identity around. Maya accepted the assignment with mixed feelings. The opportunity to shape the next generation of CAS pilots was valuable, important work. But it meant leaving behind the missions, the immediate impact, the direct connection between action and outcome. The move to Nevada disrupted Lily's routine again. New school, new friends, another transition to manage. But her daughter was resilient, adapted quickly, seemed to appreciate having her mother around consistently for the first time in years. Maya threw herself into the instructor role, discovered she had a talent for teaching, for breaking down complex tactical problems into understandable components. She taught students how to manage danger-close situations, how to coordinate with JTACs on the ground, how to deliver precision ordnance under fire. She used her own missions as examples, not to brag but to illustrate decision-making under pressure. The students respected her experience, listened carefully when she talked about real-world applications of the tactics they were learning. One student, a young lieutenant named Webb, asked the question that Maya had been waiting for someone to ask. "Ma'am, in your experience, what's the hardest part of close air support?" Maya thought about it carefully before answering. "The hardest part is managing the competing pressures, The people on the ground need help immediately, but you also need to be precise because mistakes kill friendlies. You're flying fast in 3 dimensions while coordinating with people who are stationary in 2 dimensions, under fire, managing their own chaos. The hardest part is staying calm enough to do the job correctly while understanding that seconds matter, that delay can be as deadly as imprecision. Webb nodded thoughtfully. How do you train for that? How do you prepare for the stress? You train until the mechanics are automatic, until you can fly and employ weapons and navigate and communicate without conscious thought. That frees up your mental capacity for the decision-making, for the judgment calls that can't be practiced. And you trust your training, trust your aircraft, trust the people on the ground. Trust reduces stress, creates space for clear thinking. The conversation represented everything Maya valued about the instructor role, the opportunity to pass along hard-won lessons, to prepare the next generation for the realities they'd face, to ensure that the people who came after her would be ready for the work. She taught at the weapons school for 18 months before the phone call came. Tours deployed again to Afghanistan, specifically requesting her for a high-risk mission that required the best CAS pilot available. The request came through official channels, endorsed by Tor's chain of command, approved all the way up to theater command. They wanted Maya to deploy for a single mission, fly in, complete the tasking, fly out. The mission was classified, details sparse, but the implication was clear. This was important, difficult, and they trusted only her to execute it properly. Maya looked at Lily, now 9 years old, looked at the stable life they'd built in Nevada, looked at the classroom where she taught tomorrow's pilots. Then she looked at the mission request and saw Tor's name, saw the trust implicit in asking for her specifically, saw the lives that might depend on her skills. She accepted the mission. The briefing happened in a secure facility, Tor's and his team, Maya, 2 generals, and a CIA officer whose name nobody used. The target was a Taliban commander who'd been coordinating with external networks, facilitating major attacks, operating with near impunity from a compound in a valley that was considered too dangerous for conventional operations. The mission was a night raid, fast insertion, limited time on target, extraction under fire expected. Maya's role was to provide overwatch and immediate fire support if the team made contact. The wrinkle was the terrain. The valley was narrow, with high walls and limited maneuvering room. Previous attempts to operate in the area had failed due to the difficulty of providing effective air support. Torres believed Maya could overcome those challenges, could deliver precision fire in the constrained environment. The mission launched at 200 hours, 3 weeks after Maya arrived in theater. She'd spent the time requalifying in the Warthog, studying the terrain, running simulations of gun runs through the valley. The night was moonless, perfect for the SEAL insertion, terrible for visual navigation. Maya relied on her instruments, on the GPS and targeting pod, on the radio communications with Tor's team. The SEALs went in fast, ropes from helicopters, on the ground and moving before the enemy could respond. Maya circled overhead at 12,000 feet, watching through the targeting pod as white figures moved through the gray landscape, approaching the compound where the commander was sleeping. The breach was textbook explosive charge on the door, team flowing through, systematic clearing of rooms. But the compound was larger than intelligence suggested, with more fighters than expected. The radio crackled with contact reports, increasing urgency, the sound of gunfire clear in the background. Then Tor's voice, calm despite the situation. Nomad 7-1, we need immediate fire support. Multiple fighters in the compound courtyard, danger close. Friendlies are in the northern building. Maya was already diving, already lining up the shot, already calculating the angles in the narrow valley. The walls rose on either side, close enough that she'd have to roll the aircraft to thread between them, commit to the attack run with no margin for error. She rolled inverted, pulled the nose down, felt the valley walls blur past on either side as she descended. The targeting solution appeared, and she fired, the cannon roaring, 30mm rounds impacting the courtyard with devastating precision. The Warthog pulled out of the dive with meters to spare, clearing the valley wall by a margin that would look reckless on paper but felt controlled in execution. The radio confirmed hits. Courtyard is clear, continuing clearance operations. Maya climbed back to altitude, ready for another run if needed. The SEALs completed the mission commander captured, intelligence materials collected, team moving to extract point. But as they left the compound, the valley erupted with fire from multiple positions. The Taliban had reinforcements staged nearby, had responded to the raid faster than anticipated. Tor's team was caught in the open, taking fire from 3 directions, fighting their way toward the extraction helicopters that were inbound but still 2 minutes out. Maya didn't hesitate. She dove back into the valley, this time attacking from multiple angles, switching between cannon and Mavericks, suppressing each firing position in turn. The narrow walls meant she was committed to each attack run, couldn't break off if things went wrong, had to trust her skills and her aircraft completely. The Warthog took fire small arms, heavy machine guns, an RPG that passed so close she could see it through the canopy. But she kept attacking, kept creating space for the SEALs to move, kept the enemy suppressed while the team reached the landing zone. The extraction helicopters came in under fire, rotors almost touching the valley walls, pilots holding steady while the SEALs loaded. Maya made one final gun run, cannon fire walking across the enemy positions, keeping heads down while the birds lifted off and climbed hard for altitude. She stayed overhead until they were clear, until they were safely away from the valley, only then allowing herself to feel the adrenaline crash, the shaking hands, the delayed fear of how close everything had come to disaster. The flight back to base was silent, Maya processing the mission, checking her aircraft for damage. The Warthog had taken hit small arms fire through the left wing, some panel damage but nothing critical. She'd flown through hell and brought the aircraft home intact. The debrief lasted 4 hours, every detail examined, every decision analyzed. The generals called it one of the most successful high-risk operations of the deployment, praised the coordination between air and ground, specifically highlighted Maya's flying in the narrow valley as exceptional. Tors approached her afterward, expression serious. "I need to tell you something. When I requested you for this mission, my command asked why I was so insistent on a specific pilot. I told them you were the only pilot I trusted to fly in that valley, to deliver precision fire in those conditions, to stay overhead no matter what happened." He paused, meeting her eyes. "They asked what made me so confident. I told them about our history, about the missions we'd flown together, about watching you take fire to protect my team. But mostly I told them that you've never quit on a mission, never abandoned people on the ground, never let the difficulty of the situation change your commitment to the work." Maya felt the weight of those words, the trust they represented. "I wouldn't have done anything different. I know. That's exactly why I requested you." The single mission stretched into 2 weeks as Maya waited for transport back to the States. She flew 3 more missions during that time, all successful, all adding to the legend that had built around her name. When she finally boarded the transport home, she carried with her a second DFC recommendation, this one for the night raid in the narrow valley, for flying under fire in conditions that would have caused most pilots to break off. Lily was waiting at the airport when Maya arrived, holding a hand-painted sign that read, "Welcome home, Mom." The reunion was everything Maya had hoped for, her daughter healthy and happy, her mother relieved to hand back the childcare responsibilities, the familiar comfort of home after weeks in a war zone. But Maya also felt the disconnect, the difficulty of transitioning from combat to normal life, from split-second life-or-death decisions to the mundane concerns of grocery shopping and parent-teacher conferences. The second DFC came through 6 months later, another ceremony, another medal, another recognition of valor in combat. Lily was older now, understood more, asked harder questions about what the medals meant, what her mother had really done to earn them. Maya tried to answer honestly without glorifying the violence, tried to help her daughter understand that the medals represented not heroism but commitment, the willingness to do difficult, dangerous work because people depended on it. Torres attended the ceremony again, now a full lieutenant commander in the SEAL teams, his career flourishing just as Maya's was. He brought his wife and children, introduced them to Maya and Lily, created a connection between families who'd been linked through combat but had never met in peaceful circumstances. After the ceremony, Torres pulled Maya aside for a private conversation. "I'm retiring at the end of the year. 20 years of service, time to do something else." Maya felt surprised. Torres seemed built for military service, seemed like someone who'd serve until they forced him out. "What will you do?" "I'm going to teach. Work with at-risk kids, try to give them some of the discipline and purpose that the military gave me. But before I leave, I wanted to tell you something." He paused, choosing words carefully. "In 20 years of service, I've worked with hundreds of pilots, Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps, all the services. You're the best I've ever seen. Not because you're more skilled, though you're very skilled, but because you combine technical competence with genuine commitment to the people on the ground. You fly like their lives matter more than yours, and that makes all the difference." Maya didn't know what to say to that, how to respond to such direct praise. "I just do the job." "I know, that's what makes you exceptional. You don't do it for recognition or awards or career advancement. You do it because it's the right thing to do, because people need help, because you have the skills to provide that help. The military needs more people like you." The conversation stayed with Maya for weeks, made her think about her own future, her own motivations. She was 32 years old, had 11 years of service, was on track for further promotions and increased responsibility. She could continue flying, continue deploying, continue putting herself in harm's way. Or she could transition to something else, find a way to serve that didn't require months away from Lily, that didn't carry the constant risk of not coming home. The decision crystallized one evening when Lily, now 10 years old, asked a simple question. "Mom, when you deploy again, will you come back?" Not will you deploy again, but when. Assuming that deployment was inevitable, that her mother's absence was a fixed feature of life, Maya realized that Lily had never known anything else, had spent her entire conscious life watching her mother leave for war zones, had built her sense of normal around uncertainty and separation. "I don't know if I'm going to deploy again, sweetheart." Lily looked surprised. "But you're a pilot. Pilots deploy." "Some pilots do, but there are other ways to serve, other jobs in the military that don't require deployments. I'm thinking about whether it's time to do something different." "Would you still fly?" "Maybe. Or maybe I'd teach or work on planning operations or do something else that uses my experience in different ways." Lily considered this carefully. "Would you be happier?" The question cut to the heart of everything Maya had been avoiding. Would she be happier? Flying was her identity, combat was where she excelled, the missions gave her life purpose and meaning. But was that happiness? Or was it just intensity, adrenaline, the addiction of high-stakes work? "I don't know," Maya admitted, "but I think I need to find out." The next weeks brought serious reflection, conversations with mentors and peers, careful consideration of options. Maya could stay in her instructor role, could continue training the next generation without deploying. She could take a staff position, work on doctrine or planning or requirements. She could even transition out of the military entirely, find civilian applications for her skills. What she couldn't do was continue the current pattern indefinitely. The cumulative stress of combat flying, the time away from Lily, the constant management of fear and risk, all of it was taking a toll that she'd been ignoring. The decision came during a routine training flight, Maya demonstrating close air support tactics to a class of students. She was explaining the mechanics of a danger-close gun run, walking through the decision-making, when she realized she was teaching from memory rather than from current practice. The missions she referenced were months or years old. She wasn't actively doing the work anymore, just explaining how she used to do it. That realization clarified everything. She'd already transitioned away from operational flying, had already chosen teaching over deploying, had already made the decision without consciously acknowledging it. All that remained was accepting the choice, committing fully to the new path. Maya submitted her request for permanent assignment to the weapons school, removing herself from the deployment rotation, accepting that her combat flying days were over. The decision brought unexpected relief, the weight of constant readiness finally lifting from her shoulders. Lily noticed the change immediately. "You seem different, Mom. Lighter somehow," Maya smiled. "I am lighter. I'm not carrying the deployment anymore, not holding the stress of knowing I'll be leaving again. This is what staying home feels like. Do you miss it? The flying, the missions?" "Sometimes, but I'm doing different work now, work that matters in different ways. I'm teaching pilots who will deploy, who will fly the missions I used to fly. That feels important too." The years that followed brought new rhythms, new purposes. Maya became one of the most respected instructors at the weapons school, known for demanding excellence while maintaining genuine care for her students' development. She published articles on close air support tactics, presented at conferences, contributed to the evolution of doctrine. She watched Lily grow from a child into a teenager, was present for parent-teacher conferences and soccer games, and the thousand small moments that make up parenting. She maintained contact with Tors, now thriving in his civilian role, working with at-risk youth, and occasionally calling Maya for advice on teaching techniques. Their friendship had survived the transition from combat to civilian life, had proven deeper than just shared deployment experiences. 10 years after her last combat mission, Maya received a phone call from the Air Force Historical Foundation. They were documenting the contributions of women in combat aviation, wanted to interview her about her experiences, her perspective on how the role of female pilots had evolved. The interview was extensive, covering her career from flight school through combat deployments to teaching. The interviewer asked about challenges, about discrimination, about the barriers she'd faced. Maya answered carefully, acknowledging difficulties while emphasizing competence over victimhood. "There were people who doubted me because I was a woman, because I was a single mother, because I didn't fit their mental model of what a combat pilot should be. But the aircraft doesn't care about demographics. The mission doesn't care about gender. The people on the ground who need help don't care who's flying overhead as long as the ordnance lands where it's supposed to." "So you never faced real discrimination?" Maya paused, considering how to answer honestly. "I faced assumptions. I faced people who started from a position of skepticism rather than trust, but I also had the opportunity to prove those assumptions wrong through performance. Not everyone gets that opportunity, and I'm aware I was lucky in that regard. What advice would you give to young women considering combat aviation careers?" "The same advice I'd give to anyone. Be competent, be dedicated, and be willing to do the hard work of mastering your craft. Gender will create challenges, but competence overcomes most challenges eventually. Focus on being so good at the job that your capabilities become impossible to ignore." The interview became part of a larger documentary on women in combat, which premiered at the Air Force Academy 2 years later. Maya attended with Lily, now 18 and considering her own military service, and watched as her career was distilled into 10 minutes of footage and commentary. The documentary presented her as a pioneer, a trailblazer who'd helped open doors for female pilots. Maya felt uncomfortable with that framing. She'd just been trying to do her job well, hadn't considered herself part of a larger social movement. But watching Lily's face as the documentary showed footage of the A-10, as it played audio of Maya's radio transmissions during combat missions, as it interviewed Tors and others who'd worked with her, Maya realized that her individual choices had accumulated into something larger than personal achievement. After the screening, a young cadet approached Maya, nervous but determined. "Ma'am, I'm starting flight training next month. I want to fly close air support, want to do what you did. Do you have any advice?" Maya looked at this young woman, saw herself 20 years earlier, saw the determination and uncertainty mixed together. "Trust your training, trust your aircraft, and remember that the people on the ground are depending on you to be competent, not to be perfect. Nobody expects you to be perfect. They expect you to show up, do the work, and stay committed when things get hard. What if I'm not good enough? Then you get better. You train, you study, You learn from mistakes, and you keep pushing yourself to improve. Being good enough is a choice you make every day through the work you put in. The cadet nodded, thanked her, and walked away with a little more confidence in her step. Maya watched her go, feeling the continuity of service, the way one generation taught the next, the way the work continued regardless of who did it. Lily spoke quietly beside her. "Mom, I've decided I'm going to the academy. I want to fly." Maya felt a complex mix of emotions: pride, fear, hope, worry. Her daughter was choosing the same path, accepting the same risks, committing to the same demanding career. "Are you sure? It's a hard life, especially for women," Lily interrupted, smiling slightly. "Yeah, I know. I watched you navigate it my whole childhood. But I also watched you excel at it, watched you earn respect through competence, watched you make a difference. That's what I want to do." Maya pulled her daughter into a hug, feeling the weight of this moment, this choice that would shape Lily's next decades. "Then I'll support you completely, and I'll teach you everything I know." 4 years later, Maya stood in the same audience at the academy, watching Lily graduate, watching her receive her commission, watching her take the oath that Maya had taken 20 years earlier. The ceremony was formal and moving, full of tradition and symbolism, but what struck Maya most was seeing her daughter become part of the unbroken chain of service that stretched back generations. Lily went to flight school, excelled as Maya knew she would, and eventually received her assignment. Thunderbolt II, close air support, the same aircraft her mother had flown. The symmetry felt profound, the daughter literally following in the mother's contrail. Maya helped prepare her, shared tactical knowledge and practical wisdom, tried to convey the lessons learned through years of combat flying. But she also knew that Lily would have to learn some things herself, would have to develop her own approaches, her own style, her own relationship with the work. The night before Lily left for her operational assignment, they sat together on Maya's porch, watching the Nevada sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. "Are you scared?" Maya asked. "Terrified," Lily admitted, "but also excited. This is what I've wanted since I was old enough to understand what you did. It's okay to be scared. Fear keeps you sharp, keeps you from taking stupid risks." Did you ever get used to it? The fear, the danger. Maya thought about all the missions, all the times she'd rolled into an attack run while taking fire, all the moments when death felt very close. You don't get used to it exactly. You learn to manage it, to function despite it, to make clear decisions even when scared. The fear never goes away, but it becomes something you work with rather than something that controls you. They sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter, both pilots, both committed to the same demanding profession. Maya felt the weight of legacy, the responsibility of having shown her daughter this path, the hope that Lily would find in it what Maya had found: purpose, meaning, the profound satisfaction of doing difficult work well. Years passed. Lily deployed, flew combat missions, earned her own decorations, built her own reputation. Maya watched from the sidelines, retired now from active duty but still teaching part-time at the weapons school, still contributing to the profession she devoted her life to. She watched with pride as Lily handled challenges Maya had faced, saw her daughter navigate discrimination and doubt with the same focus on competence that Maya had employed. Torres called occasionally, checking in, sharing updates about his own children, maintaining the friendship they'd forged in combat and sustained through peace. He'd become a school principal, was making a difference in his community, had found a way to serve that didn't require deployments or danger. "Do you miss it?" he asked during one call. "The flying, the missions, the intensity of it all." Maya considered the question carefully. "I miss the clarity. In combat, everything is simplified: help the people on the ground, put ordnance on target, come home safe. The objectives are clear, the stakes are obvious, and success is measurable. Civilian life is messier, more ambiguous. But you don't regret retiring?" "No, I gave what I could give, did the work for as long as it made sense, and stepped back when it was time. No regrets about that. Lily's doing well. I heard about her last deployment. She's living up to the family reputation. She's building her own reputation. Better than mine, probably. She has all the tactical skills but none of the baggage, none of the need to prove herself that I carried. You paved the way for her, made it easier for her generation because you did the hard work of proving that women could excel at CAS flying. Maya smiled. I just did my job. If that made things easier for others, that's a bonus. The conversation reflected everything Maya had learned about service and legacy. The work mattered more than recognition. Competence spoke louder than advocacy. And the next generation would always build on what came before, would always push further than their predecessors. She was at peace with that, content to watch others take up the work she'd devoted years to, satisfied with the contribution she'd made. The phone rang late one evening, 10 years after Maya's retirement. Lily's voice on the other end, tight with controlled emotion. Mom, I need to tell you something. Today I flew a Mission SEAL's pinned down, took fire while providing CAS, brought the aircraft home damaged. It was exactly like your missions, the ones you told me about. Maya listened to her daughter describe the tactical situation, the decision-making under fire, the fear and focus mixed together. She heard herself in Lily's words, heard the same commitment, the same refusal to abandon people who needed help. How do you feel? Maya asked. Scared, proud, exhausted, grateful to be alive, all of it at once. That's normal. That's the right response. Let yourself feel it, process it, learn from it. The team leader wanted me to thank you. His name is Ramirez. He's a gunny in Tor's old unit. He said Tor's told him stories about you, about how you set the standard for what CAS pilots should be. He said I'm living up to that standard. Maya felt tears forming, emotions she'd kept controlled for years suddenly breaking through. You're not living up to my standard. You're creating your own. And from what you've just described, it's a damn high standard. Mother and daughter talked for another hour, sharing experiences across the decades, creating continuity between past and present. When the call ended, Maya sat in the darkness of her home, thinking about the strange trajectory of her life from doubted pilot to decorated veteran to instructor to mother of a pilot who was now facing the same challenges, making the same choices, continuing the work. She thought about all the missions, all the people she'd helped, all the students she'd taught, all the ways that one person's competence could ripple forward through time and affect others. The legacy wasn't about her individual achievements, wasn't about the medals or the recognition. It was about showing that the work could be done well, that dedication and skill mattered more than demographics, that the next generation could build on what came before and push even higher. Maya walked to her study, opened the case containing her medals and commendations, looked at the physical symbols of her service. But her eyes moved past them to the photo on the wall, Lily in her flight suit, standing beside her A-10, crew chief giving a thumbs up in the background. That image represented everything that mattered: the work continuing, the tradition maintained, the commitment to service passed from one generation to the next. The medals were artifacts of past actions, but the photo was proof that those actions had meaning beyond the moment, had contributed to something larger than individual achievement. Maya closed the case and turned off the light, carrying with her the quiet satisfaction of knowing that the work she devoted her life to was in good hands, would continue long after she was gone, would evolve and improve as each generation learned from the last. The mission was never really complete. It just passed from one pilot to the next, from one team to the next, an unbroken chain of service stretching back to the beginning of military aviation and forward to whatever future awaited. She'd done her part, flown her missions, taught her students, raised her daughter. The rest was up to them, and based on what she'd seen, they were ready.